week in Australia. And we have today, I think Byron's phrased it as a talk for newbies by a newbie. So Byron is a solution architect for Kaseya. He's going to take us through some of his sort of exploration of PowerShell and how he's used it to help solve some customer problems, along with some of his software from Kaseya, as well as some sort of other solutions in customer environments, and hopefully also share with us, especially for people getting started, some ideas on what he found useful, tools he's used, and how he's been going exploring PowerShell. So Byron, thanks so much for today. And yeah, we always love talks by beginners for beginners. So thanks for stepping up and sharing with the community. I'll hand it over to you.
All right, really appreciate it, Ben. I'm just looking forward to delivering this conversation because I look at it while I'm starting on my PowerShell journey, been on it for a few years. If I could have ever had someone share with me some of the things that I hope to share, it just would have made things a lot more smarter to enjoy the PowerShell journey. So as you can see the talk, PowerShell for a newbie from a newbie. I don't claim to be a developer of any type. I get along well with scripting, the developer's mindset, that's not me. So I just want to share with people, if you're using this as a tool set, this is part of the journey I went through in order to fully embrace PowerShell. So PowerShell for newbies overview. Why use PowerShell? I'll go a little bit into that. We always know the value, but at times we don't talk about the value as it pertains to the organization. I'll talk about my PowerShell experience. That was an eye-opener because it allowed me to start leveraging the knowledge base of other more experienced PowerShell professionals. I'll talk about what you can versus what I'm actually doing with PowerShell. I'll go again into how I'm using it for the environment, just delivering solutions, coming up with more use cases. Where I started, I always talk about starting off small, so I'll talk about some of the projects I'm working on. And the next steps of my PowerShell journey, because as a heads up, Ben, I'd like to come back hopefully next quarter when we have this type of talk again. So I can say this is how far along I am from the last time I talked to where we are now. So hopefully I can be some type of living journal with my experience that can help other professionals.
Sounds great. I'll pencil you in already.
All right, cool. All right, so why use PowerShell? Now, the common knowledge everyone would talk about, oh, I can use PowerShell for workload management. I can manage my Windows-based systems and other systems using PowerShell. I can use PowerShell to standardize configurations for my workloads. Maybe extract data using PowerShell because you can query your systems via WMI to extract data and feed it into different platforms. Importantly, you can also use PowerShell to secure systems. So all this is standard common knowledge. Now, this is me. This is Byron talking. My curiosity as a solution architect. Modules. I had to wrap my head around modules. So for newbies getting in touch or starting to use PowerShell, learn about the ecosystem. I'll leave some links at the end of the presentation of resources I'm using from either Microsoft or sources like Stack Overflow, just to learn more about it because it will help you with your designs later on. Security is a major topic of discussion whenever I speak with customers, partners, fellow engineers, and just relating it back to PowerShell. There are different ways to implement and manage security using PowerShell. And the more I was reading about modules focused on security or using mechanisms, let's say PowerShell to guard against CryptoLocker, PowerShell to encrypt file systems, those types of things started to ring true with me as projects I wanted to investigate further. Orchestration. One of the things that will have me at my keyboard just kind of stuck, frozen, was thinking about how do I manage all these thoughts through a PowerShell script. So after a while, I realized that I was looking at trying to do too much with the script, and I actually needed to know more about how to orchestrate PowerShell to hit the technical targets that I'm looking to do, be it configuration, security, application deployment. I had to look at it. You're looking at orchestrating a group of scripts and not just have one large script to do all the work. And then most importantly, visibility. Again, yes, I'm a solution architect with the organization called Kaseya. We're known for being an IT management cloud company, just quite a few things. The focus of our platform is automation. But when it comes to visibility, if I'm running a PowerShell command, I have to show, let's say, my manager or customers, what was the net effects of PowerShell? Do I have a before picture before applying PowerShell and an after picture? Is this helping with auditing or security compliance? So when it comes to visibility, it was really about how do I document for compliance and other reasons the effectiveness of using PowerShell in the environment. So this is where it comes to looking at it from a non-technical, almost a business perspective. What business focus did it serve? How did we gain value from using PowerShell? So visibility just allows me to say PowerShell, write these events to an event log, write this to another log, or create a report that I can then present to colleagues and other engineers. So let's talk about level of experience. Knowing versus experience, I'm still on the knowing about PowerShell level. My experience is still, I would say, intro to maybe intermediate. I'm not afraid of PowerShell, but I will tell you in a heartbeat, I need quite a bit of resources to get me over the hump of what I like to do. So how do I obtain experience? This is where I wish someone was sat down with me and say, listen, come up with small use cases. What are your true goals and objectives? Now I'll share with you one of my first PowerShell scripts where the actual PowerShell command is very minimal versus what I'm using to do to secure environments or workstations. So use cases are critically important because it allows you to focus your efforts on just taking care of that one use case. And then just do research on the internet. Again, I go to Stack Overflow quite a bit. PowerShell.org, Microsoft's TechNet, quite a few places to look at examples. Just want to create a script, great. I'll copy it over, try to run it, look at the error messages just to say, I know I need to tweak these areas for my environment. Okay, now going back to like, say, use cases, again, because of our company and the focus of our platform, we deal a lot with managed service providers as well as mid-market enterprises. They always talk about using things as a service, disaster recovery as a service, single or multi-site, backup as a service, whether it's on-premise or off-premise, security as a service, which that can be a long conversation itself. And lastly, configuration management. And I'll talk about DSC, but definitely leave that for Jeff Alexander. Love that guy. Every time I have a question about System Center, PowerShell, whatever, I know I can aim it at him and he has an answer. Now, when it comes to these business services, we started to break it down into different technical projects. I work with a gentleman named Craig Allen. We're always talking about services we see in the marketplace, whether it's, again, mid-market enterprise or MSP. They're looking at services like DR or backup. So we start looking at projects where when we need to take care of security, is it just one module or multiple modules? How do we secure the modules? Again, encryption modules, self-explanatory, desired state configuration. I'll leave it again for an expert like Jeff, but I became very intrigued with DSC when I first heard about it as a way of standardizing configurations and guarding against configuration drift. So again, with technical projects. And lastly, we're looking at organizations. Our customer base they're increasingly looking at Azure automation, AWS. We want to help them do all that through a single platform. So with us, it's about looking at how can we use PowerShell to automate, let's say, Azure. And one of our largest customers, they standardized on Hyper-V while VMware was all the rage. Hardly anyone was looking at Hyper-V. Not only did they standardize on Hyper-V, but using the Kaseya platform, they were able to do all the dynamic scalability and provisioning using PowerShell. So Kaseya's platform, VSA platform, helped this MSP orchestrate all their PowerShell to deploy a public cloud, and they are huge over in New Zealand. Okay, so again, just going back, not call these my requirements or my thought process. What's my initial focus? So for an example, I was looking at locking down systems when it comes to PowerShell, and I'll show it on the platform. I didn't want anyone just to run PowerShell arbitrarily. So my first focus and my first foray into PowerShell was about making sure no one can run PowerShell at all. I looked at the requirements to lock down that type of service, or how can I safeguard to have people run PowerShell unwittingly from downloading and attaching from the internet, and now it's running. So I was looking at the requirements to deliver a solution like that, and then resources. And when I say resources, I have to smile about it because I kept going directly to Stack Overflow. I was like, okay, can anyone do this type of work? So I would do searches through the internet. Stack Overflow just offered a lot of resources to help me understand more about PowerShell and how people are using it. So resources, if someone already created a PowerShell script that meets my focus, I am going to copy it, modify it, use it, give them full credit for all the hard work they're doing. But all the resources, a lot of the PowerShell came from me using someone else's script as a model, revise it to meet my needs, and then just move forward with it. Then from there, I would create the model, basically my PowerShell script that I want to implement. From there, of course, start going through the testing of it, feedback, going back to, did it meet my initial focus, my initial requirements? If so, great. If not, I just go through the next iteration of change in order to have a PowerShell script that meets my needs. And that's how I take care of my PowerShell project. Now, this should be the last slide before I go into the platform, but this is how I had to orchestrate PowerShell. Our Kaseya server can automate almost any system that has an agent. So if we have, let's say these represent Windows servers, each one that has a Kaseya agent. From the Kaseya server, I can say run PowerShell against this system or all of them. Whereas the PowerShell and me working with it is done from the Kaseya server. So it's running PowerShell, but it all has to come through our automation platform. And the reason why, my technical requirements were, how do I standardize one of the modules that I need to support a particular PowerShell script? If they have to be imported or added to a particular system, that will be part of my remediation to prep the system to support a particular PowerShell script. How can I do it securely? Because ideally the way I want it to work and is getting there slowly but surely, this system, Agent 1, for example, when it runs this PowerShell script, it wants to make sure the way we have security set up, that PowerShell script has been signed. It's been signed by a secure authority. We can check in on who's the actual owner, just basically security safeguards to make sure that if the script is coming from a Kaseya server, it's signed by the server, has a certificate, it can be checked upon before that script is actually run. That was one of the requirements of one of our partners. they're not allowed to run anything unless that script can be verified as coming from a particular system. Great. So we were talking about that and saying, let's standardize this type of process moving forward, working with other people. Every time a PowerShell script is going to be run, let's make sure that script has been signed by the proper system. The scheduling. We often talk about automation here at Kaseya. We look at, if you want to run PowerShell, what's the focus and how often? For example, when it comes to database, and I have a PowerShell script for that, how often are you running this particular system and what kind of feedback do you want to have? So that was part of our orchestration. And then auditing, we had some deep conversations with, again, partners and customers who were saying, great, we know what we can do with PowerShell. We're going down that path, but we need to make sure it touches upon certain things. So we have a script that says it automates backup, it automates security. We need to report against it for auditing purposes. If, let's say, a KPMG comes in, they need to generate a report that shows them we're doing A, B, and C. We automated this. The script that manages certain services is not only secured by a certificate, it's run by a centralized server. We have it locked down so no one else can run these scripts. And then reports. A lot of customers, they just want to have a nice, friendly report at the end of the month. You're great, we're using PowerShell to do backups. Just give me a report of all these successful backups. If there was an issue, when was the issue? And that's where we use PowerShell again to restart a, let's say, a failed backup job. Okay, so automation overview. I get a chance to go into the platform. Any questions so far?
No, none so far from everybody listening, and I think that was a really good intro, Byron, into how you came at PowerShell and what sort of got you started. So I like that. That was great. I think the community is going to really like that, especially the beginners we've got. So yeah, continue on.
All right, no problem. I just remember when I wanted to learn about it, I felt overwhelmed with what I wanted to do versus the actual knowledge to do it with PowerShell.
I think a lot of people get stuck there. That's why, I mean, the use case advice was great. Just start with something simple.
Yeah, and it really builds quickly once you start using it very small. That's the funny thing. Once you say, well, I can do this, great. Okay, then you start to look at other ways of doing the same thing. So this is our automation platform, our VSA platform with Kaseya. One of the modules is called agent procedures. This is our scripting environment. So we can come up with scripts. What I like about the Kaseya scripting environment is flexible enough where, again, you don't have to be a full-blown developer to use the scripting environment. It's very declarative, very straightforward. The beauty in the scripting environment is that you can call a lot of support for PowerShell. So if you already have, let's say, a set of PowerShell scripts, great. You don't have to modify it. We can just now load it into Kaseya or point to a server to say, here where the scripts are stored. We can run them against any workload as you require. So it has a lot of great things. So as you can see here, I have my PowerShell folder where I have some scripts. According to the folders, I'm still working on the installation because I'm looking at using PowerShell to help me with image deployment. Another discussion later on. So under PowerShell security, when I was talking about one of the very first PowerShell scripts that I wrote was really about restricting running of scripts. So just to give you a high-level view again of some of the requirements outside of PowerShell that PowerShell helps me meet. So for example, this is my PowerShell script. I pre-pinned it with 64 to let me know it's supposed to run against a 64-bit system. Which is, as a heads up, all PowerShell commands are not created equally. They are 32-bit versus 64-bit. You're running a 64-bit platform. You can support 32 and 64-bit PowerShell. How you execute it, what it changes, will be based upon your knowledge of the workload. Trust me, I learned that small lesson the hard way, but it was fun, trust me. So my PowerShell script here, PS64 restrict scripts. This is where my tab where it tells me I can run it. As you can see, I ran it successfully against one system and unsuccessfully against another system. I believe that was for another script, but anyway, this is my workstation. So as part of the audit trail, most of the customers that I talk with, if not all of them, they always want to say who ran it, when was the last time it ran, what was the status of it once it ran. So here lets me know the last time I ran it was on July 22nd. Back then it was a success. I believe this error message is for something else. All right. The tab that says view procedure lets me look at the procedure itself or everything about PowerShell. What I'll do is just edit this so I can open up their agent procedure editing environment. And we can take a look at it. And again, when you see the PowerShell, you say it's only a few commands. It's just the other things that works with it that help you use it effectively. So again, the SA platform, I'm in our agent procedures. Now I'm looking at our agent procedures in the editing environment. So all the statements of what is available to me is listed on the left. We follow, the typical logic such as if and else type statements. Here, this script is just to lock down PowerShell. I just don't want it running at all because I want to manage essentially from the VSA platform. So up top, I start to create different variables. I'm working on this area because I want to pull in more information. But basically, just to walk through, I'm asking our agent procedure to check the bit version of the platform and running the PowerShell commands against. If it's a 64-bit environment, I know I can run 64-bit and 32-bit PowerShell commands. The way we support it, we can run PowerShell commands as either the system, where it's a user. In this case, I'm running it as the system because it elevates the privileges without having to, let's say, elevate the user permissions to run PowerShell. Again, the average person shouldn't run it. Your system administrators, these types of professionals will use it, so they're going to use it differently. So here's my execute PowerShell command, 64-bit. I have a choice. I can list the PowerShell script. This is, again, great for organizations that already have a bunch of PowerShell scripts. They can just list the ones that they want to and wrap other services around it. Here, I'm just basically getting the execution policy. The results of it goes into a variable, say to a text file that I can query later. And when I was talking about that visibility, as you can see, after it runs the execution policy and get the status of it, it would create an entry in my Windows event logs. So create event log entry. On your system event log, as a warning, it will say current PowerShell execution policy is set to, let's say, restricted. If it's set to, let's say, unrestricted, it will say current PowerShell execution policy is set to unrestricted, will remediate or something like that. The whole point is the system or my PowerShell or my agent procedures is logging every step of the way. Am I running a script? Why am I running a script? I'm running it because systems are open. I want to lock it down. So give me the status of it before you run a script. Log it to whatever log entry. Next step is looking at the PowerShell results. If it's not equal to restricted, meaning anything else other than restricted, start to do some additional steps. So if I have a system that's unrestricted, it will say the PowerShell execution policy is not set to restricted. So that way we can query the event log, the system event log on that system, and create a report against it if necessary. And then from there, I start to do simple PowerShell commands, set my execution policy to restrict it, and use the force switch so it doesn't prompt the user to have any type of feedback. And then later on, do the same thing again for 32-bit system. It would check to make sure everything is okay. Just for fun, I had additional elements here about sending me an email, more info. But say we go to a system and that system has restricted, it would just say no action required, PowerShell policy is already set to restricted. This was just a very simple one using literally 2 PowerShell commands. Get the execution policy and set the execution policy. Everything else was giving me management visibility so I can report to, let's say, key stakeholders or security teams, auditors. Yes, I check for this. We run it every day. Any system that's not equal to restricted will go through this compliance check. PowerShell will restrict all PowerShell scripts on that system. So this was actually my first one. It was only 2 PowerShell commands, but everything else was to create the visibility I need to talk about it from a business perspective. Any questions so far?
No, none so far. I might just point out for viewers too that the rest of the syntax here isn't pure PowerShell. So this is scripting syntax from the Kaseya platform. That's right. Isn't it, Byron?
Correct.
Very so correct. Don't try get OS in PowerShell. That's probably not going to work.
Yeah,
but it's good. I like this because a lot of people are going to have tools at work that they're already got. They're going to have enterprise management platforms, and there's a great example of how you can start working PowerShell into your existing frameworks as well. So, yeah.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up because that's one of the things I talk with engineers. Find out if there's a PowerShell module for certain workloads. I'm looking into the PowerShell module for Linux environments where our agents can be deployed on Linux systems. And I'm like, well, that's promising. So if I can create PowerShell commands to run against Linux workloads, I like to do that. I believe there's a module out there that translate PowerShell commands into Linux commands.
I haven't seen that one, but I definitely know DSC also has a Linux agent. So anything you can do with DSC, you can apply on Linux systems as well.
Oh, okay, great.
If you find that other Linux module, send me a copy for sure.
All right, definitely. Okay, so just again, some of the business use cases, let's say security as a service or backup as a service. One of the things we talk about again from Kaseya is just orchestrating and automating all of those types of services. So this is one that I'm starting on. I'll show you the source code because I'm actually calling the PowerShell script that handles the backup. So some of this I'm working on is just prepping that system to make sure it can go through a successful backup process. So if a user is logged in, it just basically send a message to the user, please disconnect. We're going to perform backups of it, basically either snapshot it or take it offline. Those are additional things I'm looking into with PowerShell. And then again, that visibility of creating event logs, whether it's for our specific Kaseya entry or Kaseya log, or your Windows system event log. Or here, I think I'm using application. Yep. Yeah, so I'm using just the application log to capture this information. And again, we monitor these event logs so we can create reports against it. And then from there, I can start stopping Windows service just to make sure that when I need to go through this backup, I can do a lot of it through PowerShell, or I can split the work and say PowerShell, focus on this, where I use some of the native stuff for my platform to take care of the other stuff. And again, just like the execute PowerShell command I was showing for locking down a system, instead of putting all the commands on one line, I'm using this particular PowerShell script. And here is the PowerShell script for performing a backup. And I actually took this from Stack Overflow. So I'm still working out some of the kinks. Very simple, but also as part of the script, I'm like, okay, I know I can execute the PowerShell through PowerShell doing a backup of SQL Server. I'm using this. As I go through it, I want to make sure that it has some type of error handling if it fails. I want to find out where it actually failed. Also, if I need to add entries to say, write this specifically to the event log, I may have to do that through modifying this as well. So when I say resources on the internet, Stack Overflow can be your best friend, because someone out there just loves to create, like your PowerShell MVPs. They probably sleep, eat, breathe PowerShell. They may have so many scripts on Stack Overflow. They are so valuable to a person like me who's getting up to speed on it. With one of our customers, they focus on disaster recovery or backup as a service. Just from experience, we know that backing up a database is not a straightforward process all the time. You may have to quiesce the file system, have things flush from the memory or cache into the logs or committed to the database. So those types of procedural steps, we want to make sure they are done before the backup is taken, and then also when the backup is complete, to go through a health check, so to speak, using PowerShell to say, was the backup successful? Services restarted? Is the system available? And just do a health check using automation again, PowerShell on our platform to provide this type of service. So this is Notepad++. And again, I am good for reading. I am great for doing research. This type of structure, I'm slowly getting there. Right now, this is just still a template that I borrowed, making some modifications. And my goal is to create a PowerShell script that we automate the backups SQL Server with the customer and take care of pre-backup requirements as far as getting people off of it, disconnecting them, writing information to various event logs, then actually using PowerShell scripts like this to actually back up the system and do certain modifications with it. Then after the backup is done, make sure the system is up and running and everyone can connect to it again. Cool? Makes sense?
Makes sense.
Okay. All right. So what I'd like to do is just actually wrap up, because my main thing was I can share code, but most of the code I share with you isn't from me. It's from people on Stack Overflow. If I use their code, I definitely say, hey, thanks, either by upping their karma points on Stack Overflow, or just sending them a note, say, hey, I used your script, came in handy, thanks for the work. Anyone who does a lot of hard work to make my life easier, definitely get at least a thumbs up, right?
Gotta share the love.
Exactly. All right, so let's just go back to my slides. This is just certain things as far as recommended resources. The Microsoft Virtual Academy has been a godsend. I've just been studying and working with Microsoft technologies over the years. I remember everything where you just paid through the nose just to acquire Microsoft-based skills, whereas now you can just go to Microsoft Virtual Academy and literally immerse yourself there and just walk away a true Microsoft professional. So the resources available there.
Yeah, there's a great getting started with PowerShell v3 series on Virtual Academy, which is excellent.
Oh, exactly. Oh, I'm glad you said that because I actually have that as one of the windows that are open. TechNet, I was using TechNet again for years, just doing reference and research. And Stack Overflow has became another great resource only because, not because of PowerShell, I'm learning Python as well. So I started to talk with people like if I ever need help, and everyone can mention it. You go to Stack Overflow, you'll find anyone that's scripting, writing applications, anything like that. Someone on Stack Overflow will have that answer to your question. I left out a W, but www.powershell.org is another great site. There is one site that actually will be very helpful for those looking at desired state configuration. It's called 100 Days to DSC. Every day was a tip about working with desired state configuration. If you look up on AWS, they have a great entry about desired state configuration where you can download a template. It's basically a JSON template that creates a full desired state configuration, the ecosystem for you to play with on AWS. So it takes about an hour to spin up a total DSC environment where you have your servers there for pushing configs or pulling configs, but everything you need to learn more about DSC, you can hop over to AWS. They have some great resources there.
DSC was actually invented at Stack Overflow by one of the guys in their IT team to manage their own infrastructure.
Oh, okay. Makes perfect sense. Yeah, this is what I wanted to share as well. So when you mentioned on the Microsoft Virtual Academy, they're getting started with PowerShell Jumpstart, yes, stuff like this comes in handy. Yes, you will learn some skills, but it will help you open your eyes to the power of PowerShell, the makeup of the PowerShell ecosystems. I used to work for a company where one of the people there, Scott Harrell, had created a Power GUI. So, when you start getting into PowerShell and then looking at the different modules that represent various domains, you're like, wow, I can do quite a bit with PowerShell. Here's the PowerShell.org website. So that way you go there, forums, resources, ebooks, there are quite a bit there as well. My personal thing, don't reinvent the wheel. Just do not reinvent the wheel. If someone created a script that can help you, borrow it, give them a high five for their work, and use it to meet your business requirements using PowerShell. Okay, so with that, just want to say thank you. I'm free for more questions. Hopefully there's a newbie that says, hey, makes sense. I know there are resources out there. Overall, just want newbies to feel like this is something worthwhile. Yes, it is worthwhile, and not to feel overwhelmed with what you can do with PowerShell. Just start off small and have fun.
Yeah, and we've got the whole meetup group as well, who can help you out as well. So we've got lots of great people. So just a couple of questions from myself, and a few things just that I think will probably be useful for other people, that might be just getting started as well and watching the recording. Just some of the tools that you're using. I saw you using Notepad++. Do you use the PowerShell ISE interface when you're writing scripts at all, or?
Oh, yes. I like the PowerShell ISE because of, the predictive text.
Yeah, so you've got IntelliSense and lookups for existing commands and modules and the syntax.
Yes. And again, what I like about the PowerShell ISE, if I need to load in a module, for example, I'm using Visual Studio, the Community Edition 2015, 2013. I can add in PowerShell for Azure. So if I'm thinking about automating and doing some things with Azure, there are ways where you can start using the modules on Azure that are PowerShell based. So you just basically import them as a module into ISA. The
Yeah.
same with other public cloud environments as well. There are different modules that can just be imported.
Yeah, we've just got someone mentioned the PowerShell plugin for Visual Studio, but I think you just mentioned that, right, Byron, that you are using the community edition of Visual Studio. Can you just pop that up on your screen? Do you have that on that system?
Um,
Just
yes,
show
I
people.
do. Okay, so the community edition, I am very surprised with Microsoft over the past few years. With the new CEO, Satya Nadella,
Yeah,
yeah, it's just, he's just helping things just, I mean, a community edition of Visual Studio. I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool. So here's everything here. Let's say new project. So yes, I do have the PowerShell plugin. I know it's a separate install in order to use it, but I'm using it with Community Edition because I was going back and forth like, some things I'll use PowerShell, other times I was using Python. There, I'm looking at ways of standardizing a script that I'm going with. So the more modules that I discover in PowerShell may have me saying, yeah, I can do this in Python, but just for a, a common scripting environment, I may end up using a lot of PowerShell.
oh, that's great. Yeah, I mean,
And
all those visual development tools and things like IntelliSense and being able to look up modules and check syntax and autocomplete, it does make your life a lot easier, especially when you're getting started.
yeah, I'm laughing because if it wasn't for IntelliSense, I would just constantly, how do I write this command? So using IntelliSense, as soon as you hit a spacebar or start to type in, it comes up with the options to let you know, oh, you can do this and do that. And sometimes we just need a prompt to keep moving on.
Yeah, exactly. And no, that's great. A really good introduction for people, I think, on how you're seeing PowerShell fit into your day-to-day work and your customers. So thanks so much for sharing that, Byron, and definitely look forward to keeping up to date as you go and seeing how things develop. And I think it's definitely something for a lot of people. It's just getting started is the hard bit, and how to take those baby steps and how to have confidence in getting things started without worrying too much about being a master from day one. So no, thanks very much.
All right, no problem. Yeah, I believe everyone will enjoy PowerShell. As soon as they come up with one small project, it kind of steamrolls from there.
Yeah, we'll look tomorrow too. I'll be talking a lot about how to just in general how to think about your code and how to take other people's code from the web and make it your own, and how to simple steps to making good reusable modules and scripts. And I think that's another key point. You're not going to start off writing huge scripts on your own from scratch. You're going to start off taking other people's work, like you mentioned, trying it out, try and understand it, making it fit your environment, and as you go, you start building up your own library of capabilities. So, no, a really important stage in learning anything. And I still, most of the time, there's so many commandlets. There's thousands and thousands of commandlets now, and like you said, there's Azure modules, different modules for different OS. You can't know all of it, but you can definitely find someone who does. And if you've got the basics down right, you can get the job done.
So true. And that's just going back to being a newbie of saying, okay, it's a lot to learn. Let me just learn this small bit, but let me familiarize myself with the available modules, how to find out who has modules. And as you can see in the screen, you can even create your own modules. That's much later down the road, but it lets me know it's a granular platform that I can add the necessary support to be successful with PowerShell.
Definitely. All you need is get help.
So true.
Watch
So
the
true.
Watch the Virtual Academy video, and you'll be all good. No,
So
we did a
true.
workshop on that series. Actually, I used that series of videos as the basis for the first workshop we did, which was getting started with PowerShell. That was great. I think we had about 19 people come along. In Sydney, Jeff Alexander came along as well and supported. And we've had sort of some requests since to do it in some other cities, so we might try and do that in Canberra and Melbourne sometime this year too, if I get a chance. But yeah, really great video series for anyone to get started and hear from the chief architect of PowerShell himself, Jeffrey Snoover, and he's presenting in Singapore at the PowerShell conference in Singapore in September. So we've still got a few tickets available if anyone's interested. But yeah, really, really great video series, and you're going to learn a lot. All right, Byron. Well, yeah, thanks again. I think another great addition to PowerShell Week Australia. 2 for 2.
Oh, okay.
And hopefully I don't screw it up tomorrow.
I doubt it, but I'm glad you put all this together because it helps out, again, newbies like me to hear talks from other PowerShell professionals.
Yeah, no worries, and thanks for being one of those ones. Thanks for contributing, and it's never easy to be a first-time presenter, and definitely look forward to having you contribute to future events.
Yes, mark me down for the next one so I can show progress.
Will do. No worries, mate. All right, take care, and thanks for everyone for watching.
All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you again, Ben.
No worries, mate. Bye-bye.